Welcome to Volleyball State, your look at volleyball in 6 rotations. Here are your hosts, Jeff Sheldon and Lincoln Arneal.
Hey, welcome to Volleyball State. Just like Big Voice Guy said, new year, new us, and a new home for the show. We are so excited to be part of Hurrdat Sports with Volleyball State. I'm Jeff Sheldon.
I'm Lincoln Arneal.
And we are so excited to be doing our first show with the awesome team at Hurrdat Sports. That's a big deal for us. What exactly does it mean for you, the listener? Well, we think this is going to let us expand the show in some really fun ways, bring you some new features. For example, you are seeing our faces for the first time if you're watching this on YouTube. So surprise, if you've never met us before, this is what we look like. Sorry. That you got to be seeing us like this. But this is going to let us do all sorts of cool things to reach new audiences, expand the show, and bring you just a little bit closer to us when we're doing the show. So we're going to be putting up clips of the show on social media. So Twitter, Instagram, we have TikTok now. We've joined the 21st century, but for you old heads, we'll dig up our AOL Instant Messenger and our ICQ handles as well. Lincoln, you were old enough to know AOL Instant Messenger. Do you remember what your AOL Instant Messenger handle was?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this. It was LinkDog05. It was nothing too embarrassing. So,
mine was embarrassing.
Yeah, MSN Messenger was big, and that helped me get through law school as well too. So those chats, that was much more recently than the 90s. So
I think my AOL Instant Messenger handle involved the word Sheldonator, which is very embarrassing to say as a man of my age, but we're all a product of our youth. Those are old social media accounts. Lincoln, tell everyone the vast ways that they can interact with us now that we're part of Hurrdat Sports.
Yes, the best way to interact with us is on Twitter. You can at the podcast at volleyballpod, or if you prefer to send longer messages, you can email us at volleyballstate@gmail.com. You can find this show wherever you find your podcast. Our past shows they're following us over to our new platform. So if you want to dig back into some of our archives, you can go there. Also, you can go to volleyballstate.com and find our current location for our homepage for Hurrdat. So if you want to get at us individually, have some conversations, you really want to follow up with one of us individually, you can follow Jeff at where can they find you on Twitter, Jeff?
I'm at by Jeff Sheldon. That's BYJEFFSHELDON.
And I am Lincoln_VB on Twitter. Of course, I continue to write and cover all things Huskers. I've written some stuff about the Supernovas. I do have a Substack, which is playing off of our brand. It's Volleyball State at Substack.com. I post some Supernovas articles there too as well. So we put out the content. Hopefully you're enjoying it and following along.
That's right. Hey, and the best ways that you can continue to interact with us as well is to rate us, like us, subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, steal an elderly relative's phone and rate us 5 stars there. All the normal ways you're used to interacting with us will still be there, and some new ways as well. So we thought, what better way to kick off our new partnership with Hurrdat Sports by bringing you the guest that so many of you have asked about. This is one of the number one questions that Lincoln and I get, whether people are reaching out to us on social, on email, in person when Lincoln gets accosted at the Omaha Supernovas matches and he's in line to get some popcorn. Hey, when are you going to have Nebraska coach John Cook on the show? And if it was that easy, we would have done it a long time ago. But we are super excited to start our first show. Actually, it's our second show of 2024, but our first show as part of the Hurrdat Sports Network with Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook. We sit down with him to pick his brain on all sorts of topics relating to the state of college volleyball today, his place in the legacy of the sport, and maybe what could be coming for Nebraska volleyball after he is no longer the head coach. So we're excited to sit down in rotation 1 with Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook.
All right, we are joined now by Nebraska coach John Cook, who is coming off another trip to the national championship match, enjoying the offseason now. He's kind of taking a hands-off approach with beach volleyball, so he has a little more time to join us. So thanks for joining us today, John, and glad to have you on our Volleyball State.
I'm honored to be here. You guys are doing a great job. I listened to one of your podcasts, and I thought, wow, you guys are the 6 rotations. It was pretty cool. So
Are we the first non-Lauren hosted, non-Husker Sports Network show that you would have been on?
I don't know.
And if the answer is no, that's fine. Like, our feelings would be hurt.
I just can't remember or think about it, but it's been too many Zooms. So, but we Zoom all the time. I'm trying to think. Well, Peta had me on once.
That's right.
So that might be one.
That's good. Yeah.
I've been on some others, but like I just did one. It'll be on actually today. It's a Cowboys at beef station called Beck TV or Beck Network.
Okay.
BEK. They're actually, I think, involved with the new pro league now. And but anyway, we talked Cowboy stuff. So
you were on a Cowboy themed podcast before you were on with us. Yeah. I don't know how to feel about that, but thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. You've been in the news also recently too. I mean, you went in front of the legislature about a week ago and talked about USA Volleyball really being interested in moving from Anaheim to Gretna. I mean, tell us about those discussions, how they started, and kind of where they stand at this point.
Well, it's probably I'm trying to remember. It was last summer or last spring. The Nebraska Crossing people reached out to us and wanted to run some stuff by us, and they want to get Jordan involved, me involved, and just supporting this thing, get our team involved in promoting Nebraska Crossing and this new project, the Good Life Project, which is basically going to be a 3,000 acre rebuild the Nebraska Crossings, add incredible things from entertainment to restaurants to hotels. And then youth facilities, so they could have huge volleyball tournaments there, softball, soccer, all that stuff. And it's a $3 billion deal. The governor's behind it. And anyway, long story short, I don't know how we start talking about it, but I know USA Volleyball was looking for a new place to go. So I reached out to Karch, and then reached out to Jamie Davis, the CEO, and Doug Beal, who used to be the CEO. And I said, hey, you guys, this thing's going up here. They could build you whatever you want, and you can move the whole USA program here. It's going to be awesome. They're going to have a private airport to fly in and out of, and it'd be a place athletes could live, and they could do all their training there. And then with the pro teams coming in, the pro teams could share those gyms as well. Now they're talking an NHL hockey expansion team as well. So all this has been building. It's really close. The thing at the legislature was to help get the tax incentives. Again, I don't understand it, but it was interesting to go through it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's, they're very, and again, they flew out the bunch of team members and the administrators to the stadium match. They saw what's offered in Nebraska. Karch and athletes have been out. Spiron athletes have been out at other times to check it all out. And so I think they're just, finishing the paperwork.
I've dealt with Rod Yates, done some business with him before. That's the owner of Nebraska Crossing, and he's someone who really does like to think big. Probably a man after your own heart. But still, that's a really big culture shift in moving your office from Anaheim, California to the middle of Nebraska. Why do you think USA Volleyball would consider such a drastic shift away from kind of their status quo?
Well, first of all, not everybody's in Anaheim. So one, they rent the gym in Anaheim. And one of the points I made in my testimony was I've been watching Jordan and the USA women practice, and next door, or the court next over, is 75-year-old women playing volleyball. And then over there, it's karate going on. And then over there's a basketball court going on. So it's not a really great training facility.
It's like a YMCA.
Exactly. It's and then they have club tournaments in there. So, and it's wood floor. It's based on the weather. So in the winter it's freezing in there. The summer it's hotter than heck. They don't really have housing they have to figure out apartments. And then when teams come in, junior teams come in, they really don't have a great setup. They have to rent, buy a hotel or buy hotel rooms. And then not all the administrators and the offices are in Anaheim. Most of them are in Colorado Springs. So you have them split up. Then you have beach in another spot. So pulling them all together in one spot I think would be a huge cost savings. Mm-hmm. It would build, unity, and they would have, their facilities are not even would be below average in the Big Ten. Let's just put it that way. And they don't even come close to how nice we have it or some of the other Big Ten schools have it. So they would get world-class facilities as well and an arena to play in so they could host some home matches and bring international teams in. And where do they do that in LA? I mean, they're renting high school gyms.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I'm hearing about is they're going to build $1 billion arena for hockey, and then volleyball would have a part, be able to play in that as well.
Yeah. There's sounds like there's a lot of moving parts, but not only just kind of with USA Volleyball, but at the legislature too. I mean, what is the next step that you think? Are you still continuing to be involved? Are you just kind of, you feel like you've done your part and kind of advocated for this? Are you talking to Karch still, or where does kind of the path go? And is this something that is like going to be in place for the 2028 Olympic cycle? Is that kind of maybe the earliest it would be?
Well, they are, I think their lease and everything expires or whatever they've got going after the Olympics. So they need a place to move to train. So they're going to have to find something, unless they would renew there. But I think they want to take that gym and make it a warehouse or something. So the owners. So
Yikes.
So they need to do something. So I don't know where else they're looking. I don't have that much say in this. I'm just kind of like connecting people and getting them and helping Rod any way I can. And they're great. He does dream big, and he's really dreaming big. I mean, this would transform Nebraska to have a hockey team, USA Volleyball there, all these youth facilities. And again, at the hearing at the Capitol, they'd had people there talking about how much teams bring into a state money-wise and also tourism-wise. And the economic impact is, it's massive. And you just look at Kansas City. I mean, I was just down there last weekend. I mean, it's unreal. And they've got that, the Speedway, they got pro soccer, they've got the Royals, the Chiefs. I mean, it is a sports town, and people go there to have fun.
Yeah. The Nebraska Examiner has a good story out there. I'd encourage anyone to go read that Paul Hamill, who's been around the legislature for a long time, wrote. And it kind of lays out the proposal for the Good Life District in Gretna and what it would do to that part of Nebraska. But John, I guess in your view, is this, like, how close to a done deal is this? Is it still just a theoretical thing at this point? Or I think you said working on paperwork, that would indicate it's more in a state of finalization. Like, how close is this to happening?
Yeah, Rod would be able to answer that better, but I know I feel like, we're toward the finish line is that's what it feels like to me, and in the conversations and what I've heard and, testifying. I mean, the fact that we were able to go to the Capitol and testify about, and they wanted me to talk about, how we got USA Volleyball involved. I think it's pretty serious. And again, I don't know where USA Volleyball is, or what the process they have to work through. It's not a private company, so I'm sure there's a lot of hoops they have to jump through to finalize this move.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would change kind of the scene of volleyball too. I mean, how for you as how would having USA Volleyball in your backyard benefit Nebraska or other college programs? How would they benefit from that?
I don't know if it really impact us directly, but it would be located in the middle of the country, so it's equal for everybody to get to. And again, you got to remember they're running through different age groups, boys, girls, camps, so they'd have a great spot to do that in the middle of the country. So that would really, I think, simplify things, because it used to be everybody was wanted to be on the West Coast for volleyball. Now it's there's been a major shift. And I think it would help the pro leagues. I mean, look at Omaha's drawn the best, and it would be, it'd be the epicenter of volleyball in this country. And so I just think, again, look at the World Series. They don't move it. We always used to talk about, let's have the Final Four there, and everybody in volleyball complains, well, it gives Nebraska an advantage. Well, look at the World Series. I mean, it's an epic event, and they know they're going to sell it out. They're going to make money. It goes on for weeks, and so I think this would just be kind of following in as Omaha and Lincoln and Nebraska are great amateur sports towns, and they know how to do it right and take care of people.
You mentioned kind of the shift within the sport is kind of happening toward the Midwest and really Nebraska in particular. If this happened, moving USA Volleyball to this state, that falls in line with a number of, I would say, kind of legacy defining things that have happened to volleyball and the state of Nebraska in the last year. The stadium match is one of those. You see the TV numbers going up and up, and your program is usually involved in that. And you're kind of right there in the middle, John, of how this sport has exploded nationally, but with a spotlight on Nebraska in the last couple of years. At your point, or at this point in your career, is that something you think about? Is adding that to your coaching legacy something that you're conscious of, or you even think about?
I really don't think about it. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about, what else can I do? It's just things kind of happen and flow. And, I really believe this, and it's the stadium match was a defining moment for volleyball in this country. And it happened to be in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so it's brought a lot of attention. And everywhere I go, traveling, whether I'm on vacation, people know who I am. People talk about that stadium match. We're going to have a big call with ESPN next week about doing a big deal. It's just, and then the Big Ten did that, documentary. The whole nation knows about it, and people are talking about it, and it's put our players on a huge platform because everybody knows who they are as well. And I was in Kansas City, and a bunch of them are coaching club teams, and they went down there because their club teams are there. They're like rock stars walking around there. They're taking pictures, signing autographs. It's unreal. And but again, the stadium match is something that has really, really put Nebraska in the forefront.
Can you tell us any more about what sort of model this ESPN thing is? Like, what does that look like?
I think they're getting ready to do something big about Nebraska volleyball in regards to, again, everything's going to be tied into that stadium match. And, and this is the way I'm going to give a talk tonight. And I started off by, we have 1.8 million people, and we sold out a football stadium. We've sold out every match here in Nebraska since 2001. We have 1.8 million people. What the heck's going on here? Why is volleyball so big? And so I think now ESPN wants to come in and take a look what's going on here. And I think they've been in the background. There's people all the time filming, and I think ESPN has people here and as Big Ten Network, or they share or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to see. They just talked to me. We set up a Zoom call next week.
Awesome.
Interesting. Keep an eye out for that. We talked a little bit kind of about, a big part, maybe the last part of a coach's legacy, ensuring that the program can thrive after they're no longer there. How much responsibility do you feel that you to make sure that you have a successor that keeps the program at the level it currently is?
Well, all you have to do is look at football, and we can never let what has happened to football ever happen to volleyball. So there's a lot of thought. There will be a lot of thought, and continue how to make this program great and keep it where it's at. And that's again, it's tragic what's happened to football, and I think Coach Rule is going to bring it back. You can feel the momentum building, but it's been 20 years with no championships, and I think if you asked people 20 years ago, this is what's going to happen, they would think that world was coming to an end before that.
Well,
it has happened, and so we got to learn from that.
I'm glad you brought up the football analogy, because I think that's really interesting. You have seen this in a couple different ways now. Coach Osborne was involved, it looks like pretty prominently, in deciding the succession plan for when he was no longer going to be the head coach of the football team. Terry Pettit obviously put together a succession plan to steward the program to you after he decided to step down. What role do you feel like is appropriate for you in whatever comes after you? Is that a process you want to actively be involved in? Is Trev bought in on that? Or are you just stepping away at the end and it's like, hey, I've I've stewarded this for as long as I can. It is the next people's decision to make.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask, Trev. I'm at a point where I will hopefully have a chance to give my input in the plan and what I think needs to happen. And I think there'll be a nice discussion about it. And I think, Trev doesn't want to see this program, on his watch. So I think we can all work together and come up with a great plan on how to keep it going. And maybe even do some other bigger things, that would be the next thing. What's next? And I had my next thing was, and I talked about this on Lauren's podcast. We wanted to do to initiate and promote the West Coast schools coming in the Big Ten, do an event at South Point, a spring match at South Point Casino in Vegas. And I went there and checked it out. It's owned by a Nebraska family, the Gahn family, who donated the Multicultural Event Center.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has a 5,000-seater horse arena for rodeos and competitions with horses underneath it. But they can take it out and put a volleyball court in there. 5,000 seat, Big Ten wanted to televise it, everything. But we have these rules in Division I. You can't fly for a spring match. And I think there's a 400-mile limit you can travel to.
Mm-hmm.
So we applied back in the summer. We applied for an exemption. And we also threw in the SEC could do the same thing with Texas and Oklahoma. Talk to the SEC. They would do it in Huntsville, where their headquarters are. And anyway, the NCAA denied it. So, but we had everything ready to go. It would have been awesome. And again, the other thing we were with the time was we had that Redway Airlines that had direct flights to Vegas. So we could go to them and say, hey, we need about 5 planes because we're going to fill them. Because people would go to Vegas for the weekend, watch volleyball. This South Point Casino is an awesome place. They got restaurants. They got other things going on. It's Vegas. And it'd have been really, really cool. And again, promoting ahead of the big, because we're not going to play, not everybody's going to play everybody, in that Big Ten schedule.
Mm-hmm. I guess, do you have you fleshed out what your spring plan is actually going to be now?
We're just doing our normal thing. We're gonna go to a city in Nebraska. We haven't signed the contracts yet. They're having meetings and figuring it all out. The biggest thing to figure out is what's happened is, these places have smaller gyms. So they have to figure out how they're going to do the seating because it sells out. I mean, I think Central City sold out in 8 minutes.
Like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So they've got to make sure they have that ready to go, how they're going to do seatings. And so I know they had a big meeting last week. Lindsay was out there. Anyway, we're getting close to announcing it, and because they want to wait like on the day right before they're going to unleash the tickets. So, but we have a team we're playing, and a place we're going. So you just have to be patient.
Just real quick, going back to the last thing we talked about, you're hoping to be involved maybe with Trev if he chooses to involve you in stewarding the program after you are no longer with it. Do you have a time frame on when that might be, when those discussions might need to start happening, an exit strategy at all?
I think about it a little bit, but I'm really enjoying coaching. I feel like I'm coaching better than I ever have, and got a great group. So, right now I just look at year to year, and when it feels right, then it feels right. And but right now, I mean, I had a blast last year. It was one of the most fun years I've had coaching. And again, it has nothing to do with success. It's just the journey, the players, the staff, and bringing Jordan back is. It's been really, really fun coaching with her. She's a young coach, but she's got all this wisdom from playing. So it's just that's been fascinating for me. And anyway, and so to answer your question, it's just kind of year to year, and we roll.
Yeah. On the other side of the transition, we mentioned how Terry kind of had a plan to ease your transition when you became head coach. How much did you benefit from that? And I mean, is a model like that even possible now in kind of the way the sport is now and the high priced salaries and what coaches are getting paid?
Yeah, it was brilliant. And we had a great AD, Bill Byrne, who bought into that, and I thought it was great. And again, you see all these programs, coaches leaving, and then they struggle, and they'll go through a couple hires. I'm not specifically talking just volleyball. There are some great volleyball examples, but in football and basketball and so on. But that would be brilliant. But I just don't know how you can do it because, I think the money's gotten too big, and there's just too many other factors. And I'm not. Yeah, I think it would be tough. But there's ways to go about it and think about it and try to plan it out just right, and so to maximize it. So
you had mentioned going back to the conversation about USA volleyball. This all sort of started when Rod Yates with Nebraska Crossing got a hold of you, and he's made a pretty sizable commitment to volleyball in the NIL space in Nebraska. Do you feel like your program has an advantage in kind of the NIL space for commitments that local, athletic supporters, businesses have made specifically to programs? And is that an area where you feel like your program maybe has an advantage nationally?
Well, what's happening is you have the haves and the have-nots, and some of the stuff I've heard. I mean, we're not at the top of the NIL chain. I can tell you that. But
even in the volleyball, like strictly in a volleyball sense.
Yeah, I think what the key is, and again, we have a collective, and so the collective handles all this, manages it. Trev's hope is, and all the AD's hope is, and this could all happen this spring, is that the universities get more control over how this is going. But the athletes are getting more financial support than they ever have, whether it's through a collective, whether it's through the 5290 or 5920 ruling. So they're getting money every semester. Of course, they can do their own NIL deals. Or they can go through open doors. So they have a lot of opportunities now to maximize name, image, and likeness, whether we're, our collective's doing something or not. And so it's at all different levels. There's really good schools that have nothing. There's really good schools that have probably unlimited. And then, of course, you've got a lot of schools probably are never going to have anything. So this is where college athletics is at a crossroads right now. Which direction is it going? I don't think in our world I don't think players yet in volleyball are shopping around where they're going to get the best deal. I think they're still choosing, this is where I want to go. NIL is a part of it, but they're going there for the program, the coaches, the team, the atmosphere, the change. Whereas in football and basketball, I think you're dealing with agents. You don't even recruit anymore. You're just talking to agents and can they get the best deal and where are they going to get the most playing time? I mean, that's where those guys, we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's what Fred Hoiberg said in a recent interview that NIL is not one of the first questions. It is the first question that they get in the men's basketball world. I mean, where does that come up in the recruiting process too? I mean, is it an early question or is it down the road once you've sold them on the volleyball aspect of things?
Like I said, the players we're talking to are going to be juniors in high school. They don't even know what NIL is. I mean, they maybe have heard about it, but they really don't know what it is. The parents really don't know what it is. I don't think Allie, for example, is going to USC because she got the best offer there. I think she's going there because of her major, what she wants. She wants to try beach. Again, I'm speaking a little bit for Allie, but it's a more of a life career type decision and something different. I can tell you some of the transfers we've talked to didn't even know what NIL was. So that's the spectrum. And then you've got other spectrums where there's big offers being made to try to have an advantage over another school when recruiting a transfer, or potentially now I'm starting to see it creep in with the top recruits, their offers that they're getting, whether they ask for it or not.
I think you mentioned Allie Batenhorst, who's going to play beach volleyball for you this spring, and then once she graduates in May, is going to transfer to USC. And I think she had announced that just after, like the day after our last show came out. So this is the first time that we've talked about it on the show. Do you feel like your roster now is finalized for the fall, or do you think there could still be some movement? Would you be surprised by any more movement like this spring?
Nothing surprises me anymore. So it's. I've tried to fight this for as long as I could, but the reality is you're going to reinvent your team every year and maybe even every semester. So it's nothing surprises me anymore. I've seen enough to know that the world has completely changed in coaching, and you better adapt or you're going to get left behind, or you're going to be very unhappy. If you're not going with the flow. But and again, I heard Nick Saban talk about it. I've heard some other older coaches got out the basketball coach at back east who won. I'm trying to think of who his name was in school. But, I mean, NIL drove him out. You guys know who I'm talking about? He's in the Big East. No,
Yeah,
not Jim.
Well, soon to be Rick Pitino is my guess, but he's still coaching at St. John's.
No, the coach had just resigned. He won the national championship and resigned a couple years ago.
Oh, Jay Wright.
Jay Wright.
Oh, Jay Wright at Villanova.
Yeah.
Villanova.
Okay, yeah.
The best dressed coach in college basketball.
Yeah, well, he talked about it. I mean, it's taken away a lot of the joy of coaching. And, you recruit a kid for 3 years, you build a relationship, and then boom, they just walk out. I don't know. It's hard for us older coaches. Gino, the UConn basketball coach, just had a thing in a press conference about it. Everything's transactional now. There's not the deep, long-lasting relationships. It's all transactional.
And you see that start to creep into college volleyball, but not quite yet. Is that how you're looking at it, or is it this is the landscape in your sport now too?
Yeah, it's creeped into volleyball. Yeah.
Will it get better? Do you think the transfers would decrease at all once the COVID years are done? Because I think we're at our last year where the last people who played during the COVID year are going to be seniors this fall. Will transfers decrease, or they're just going to continue to rise?
That's a great question. I don't know. It is. I think it could go down a little bit just because there'll be less fifth-year players. But and you look at we had 2 freshmen and a sophomore transfer. So we had a great team, a great season, great chemistry, one of the best ever. But, I think it just really is going to depend. But it's so easy to transfer now. And that is, you're recruiting high school players. You're also recruiting the portal. And it's just so easy to transfer. So it takes 5 minutes and you're a free agent.
So I feel like I do have to ask, though, your program has benefited from transfers certainly over the years and it brought in some really good players. Would you sacrifice the opportunity to add a really good transfer to your program if it meant that nobody was really adding transfers? Would you go back to a more restrictive transfer rule setup if you could, even if that meant you don't get a player like a Merritt Beeson or a Taylor Landfair?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, I hear a lot of coaches talk about the negatives of the transfer portal and what chaos it puts their team in, and they're constantly managing rosters now. And I really do feel for coaches in that, because it makes the calendar go year round and it can cause a lot of uncertainty to a roster. At the same time, there are programs out there who add really good players via the transfer portal. And I would count Nebraska among that group. Texas certainly has added a lot of talent via the transfer portal. And so there are positives, it seems, too. Do you feel like the negatives that you see as a head coach are greater than the positives that your program has gained from transfers? And you would go back to the way it used to be, where transfers were very rare, if you could, even acknowledging that you've gained some really good players over the years through the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the question is irrelevant, because I think the way the rules are now and the changes that have happened, there's no way we're going back. It's a free agency market. coaches can leave whenever they want, players can leave. They can get paid now, and they're going to continue to get paid. So it's going to be like the NFL, NBA, where, and you don't even have to, I think those guys, you have to go like 2 years or something before you can leave or get traded or whatever. Or, I know there's some restrictions.
There's contracts and you can't tamper with someone under contract.
Right. And maybe if we go to this, new thing, maybe there's going to be contracts with athletes, and maybe that would, slow it down. But right now it's going, and it ain't slowing down till something like that would happen, or players unionize, and there's ways to control it. So, we're not, I think Nebraska, we're still going to try to build program through the high school recruits. Cause I still think, I don't know, it's just the way we're wired, and that's what we want to do. But if there's a need, then that portal's there. And, when you have players leave, and everybody's having players leave, it's not like, we're recruiting, high school juniors. You got to wait 2 years till they get here.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody leaves, that's one way you can go and try to replace that.
For sure. Speaking of other changes that are coming this year, you serve on the rules committee, and it was just passed earlier this week. A couple of them finalized rule change. To me, the most significant one was allowing double contacts by setters when it stays on your side of the net. How do you see that impacting the game, and why was that a needed change in college volleyball?
Yeah, at first I was opposed to it because I'm a purist, and that's a skill. But after watching men's volleyball, they took it out, and again, I want to just say we're the one sport that has more rules for more ages, boys, girls, ages, international, U.S., college, non-college. I mean, we have more rules for the game of volleyball than any other sport. To me, it's nuts. And but if you watch the men, they took it out. It hasn't changed the game. In fact, it takes out a call that the ref has to make. I think internationally, you very rarely see it ever called. I mean, I've talked to Jordan about it. It's very, very rarely. I think it frees the setters. And I think, the negative or the downside of it is at the lower levels, is it going to make the game uglier? Is it going to force those players to just get away with, not setting the ball cleanly? But it's only going to hurt their team if they can't set. So, and especially, and again, this is another thing. I go to high school state championships. They call it tighter there than they do in college. Okay, that makes no sense to me. We should be calling it looser at the younger ages and tighter at the top. And it's the reverse. So you guys should do a whole podcast on why that's backwards. I mean, it's crazy. So I think, and I just noticed in Kansas City last week, they weren't calling anything, and it's great. There's a little spin. The parents all groan, and they all get upset. It doesn't really impact the game at all.
Right.
In fact, one less call and it keeps it moving.
Well, if you're a setter, right, like tempo and location are the two biggest things you got to worry about. And if there's a little spin on the ball, I don't view that as a really big problem. Like if you can't set, you're going to get found out pretty quick, regardless of whether you had two separate hands on the ball, split second apart. What about the other big rule change, dressing two liberos, being able to have that? Do you feel like that's going to be a big impact positively or negatively?
No, I really don't understand why you would want two liberos or how you would use them. We're not going to spend any time trying to figure it out. I mean, the goal is to get one libero out there and have them out there all the time. But what I've seen internationally in men, when they were experimenting with this rule, they would have, so Lincoln's a better passer than you, Jeff. So serve with Steve, he's in. Then when we're serving, you're a better defender, so you come in and get him out. To me, that's, you got more people coming in and out. We already have too many people coming in and out. Now we got more. But where the big push was for this was with the Division III NAIA junior college, because they're recruiting numbers to be in their program. So I'll use Doane College as an example. They have about 30 kids on their team. They have a varsity and a JV. I think 80% of the students there play sports. So you go there to be involved in sports. Well, if I'm the Doane coach, I can recruit and I can say, hey, Lincoln and Jeff, you're both going to play libero. So we're going to have two people wearing the jersey. So it'll be easier for me to recruit you because now I can give you more of a role than just, oh, you might be a DS. And
well,
so
coaches are selling participation, but also to their athletic departments. A lot of programs at the smaller level get more funding based on how many players are on their roster. So that's another incentive for coaches to make their rosters bigger.
right. And so I think that's where that group's more excited. I have yet to talk to one Division I coach to say, man, I'm going to figure out this 2 libero thing. So
I bet you the one coach who's probably for it was Eve Rack at Tennessee. She lost her libero in that first set of in the middle of the first set against Texas in the tournament, and then she couldn't replace it till the second set. So they played most of that first set without a libero. So I mean, injury may be that, but I feel like that's still. You're not going to typically put your top 2 defenders as your liberos because your second defender is usually going to play defensive specialist for a rotation or 2. So
right.
Another question here. I mean, Brian Magmatang is headed off to be an assistant coach down at UNLV. He was the video tech coordinator at the program. Do you have plans to replace that position or hope to have them in place by the summer or earlier than that?
Yeah, we're going through the interview process right now. We did an open search and it's going through the interview process right now. I'd like to have somebody here by the time we get finished with Beach.
Does Nate send you recommendations for guys that he or people he comes across in the video coordinator community?
Yeah, Jalen hangs with all those guys because, he does a lot of stuff with USA Volleyball. So he knows them all, and he got the word out like, hey, we're looking for somebody. And Brian knows them all too. It's like a little, I don't want to say cult, but maybe like a little fraternity of, guys that code. They actually do a lot more than that. Than just code. And here they have a lot more responsibility. They have a pretty big job description list. And that's why it's a full-time position, but they all know, and the word's out, and we had a lot of really good people apply, and it's still there's still only a handful of schools that really have a full-time person that does that. A lot of them have grad assistants, and these are top 10 programs, or they don't even have one, and they got to figure out somebody to try to do it, or they don't do it, or have that capability. So it's still evolving where, every Division I women's basketball program is going to have a video guy or a video person.
Yeah.
And
maybe women too. Natalie Reagan was a technical coordinator. Now she's head coach at Long Beach State. So
yeah, well, that's typically how this has worked. We'll hire somebody, and if they have that skill, it makes them more valuable as a coach, because they probably are going to go somewhere where they don't have somebody, so they can help do that, or train somebody, or get a student and train them to code. And every one of our people have either gone on to the national team or gone on to a coaching position.
John, I think last thing we got, we're talking about sort of the video analysis of volleyball. We've all watched the Pro Volleyball Federation now in the over the last month, and seen what the Bolt 6 replay system does to that game, how it speeds it up, how it sort of reduces the uncertainty on some of these calls. Do you think that we're at all close to a place where an improved video review system is coming to college volleyball, even if it's just for like the postseason?
I wish you were in our Big Ten meetings.
If you want to invite me to a Big Ten meeting, I will come to one.
Yeah,
we'll come.
Obviously the coaches feel the same way you do. Like, why don't we have this system or the Hawkeye system? The SEC is going to get it this year, so they're going to be a big step ahead of everybody else. We are currently...
They're going to get the Hawkeye system, or like the Bolt 6?
I don't know which system they're going to get, but they're getting one of those. I don't know specifically which one it is. We're under contract with DV Sport, which, again, I'm not throwing DV Sport under the bus, but they're way behind in their technology and so on compared to those other systems, as you know. And I'm on the rules committee. I see every review, how long it takes, the average. There was one review that went 11 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and a lot of times they can't figure it out because the camera angles aren't good enough. And so they're just like, I can't tell. I mean, I've heard that. I probably hear that 25% of the time. We can't tell. So there is a need. Volleyball needs to be there. It is a cost, and they're under contract with DV Sport in the Big Ten. I don't know what the other conferences are doing. Obviously, SEC made a decision to go with new technology, and that's awesome. And hopefully we'll be behind them, or DV Sport's going to have to step it up. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
But I saw 18 coaches all feel the same way.
For sure. There's 11,000 people at the Omaha Supernova games who feel the same way too. I think the first time there was a replay challenge, I don't know if they knew what was happening. So it's definitely a good step forward. So, well, cool. Well, thank you very much for your time, John. We appreciate your insight, and best of luck the rest of the spring, and enjoy beach season, taking a step back.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have you back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so again, you guys are doing a great job, and you talk about everything coming to Nebraska. How many states have a podcast about volleyball?
We've come across like 4.
Okay.
But a lot of them do, look at the national picture, and we try to a little bit too. But yeah, there's I think the fact that there's more interest in the sport, whether it's podcast form, TV ratings, increased news coverage is only going to kind of lift all boats, which is something that we were interested in doing, is creating a smarter, better informed volleyball fan, and having you come on and talk to us about stuff like this really helps move the needle on that.
Yeah. Okay. So people just can't make stuff up and say stuff now. So at least we clarified some of that. But
yes, for sure.
We discourage that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. But hey, if I come back on, I want to do the 6 rotation thing. That was really cool. Rotation 1. Here we go. So.
Yeah.
You are rotation 1. I don't even think we're doing 6 this one, but okay. We got stuck in a rotation we liked. That was a good point scoring rotation for us. And thank you for doing that with us.
Yeah. So anyway, awesome. Okay. All right. You guys have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, John.
See you later.
Thanks again to John Cook for joining us on Volleyball State. A great guest, a great first time appearance for us, appearing on part of the Hurrdat Sports family. Lincoln, I want to just follow up on some of the things that John had mentioned. The one that sticks out in my mind is he seems to think that this USA volleyball transition to Gretna is kind of a done deal, that it's getting close. And I was not of the impression going into our conversation that it was. I didn't know if it was still theoretical, and maybe it still is, and it's just John and Rod Yates trying to think big and manifest this into existence. But I mean, that would be transformational, not just for that local economy in West Omaha and Gretna, but as to where the epicenter of volleyball in this country truly is. Yeah,
and that's what I'm always skeptical about these big grandiose projects, is that, I mean, we haven't heard anything from USA Volleyball. They haven't teased it or anything, and that's probably they're taking care of things on their end. They don't want to announce it till they get everything signed and sealed and squared away. So that's when I will really like, okay, this is happening, is when I see something from USA Volleyball. But I mean, it's an exciting plan, and it would really, like you said, change the landscape of college volleyball, and college volleyball, USA Volleyball, and kind of have some trickle down to college volleyball as well too. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, the questions that I still have are like, how much is it dependent on that bill getting out of the legislature about the tax district? And then 2, is an NHL team also contingent on that? Because there's a lot of, expansion going on in the NHL, and I don't know how big the Omaha, not even the Omaha urban core, the Omaha suburban site is attractive.
So what you're saying is, like, if they cannot get an NHL franchise to commit to coming to this development, would the arena still be the same? Because I know when Kansas City built what I think is now the T-Mobile Center, is that originally the Sprint Center, the main arena in downtown Kansas City, they did so thinking that their anchor tenant was going to be an NHL franchise. I think they thought they were getting the Pittsburgh Penguins were going to move or something before Mario Lemieux stepped in and saved that. So, like, does that change the plan? I mean, you and I both follow the legislature to an extent. I would be optimistic that if the governor were behind this, and knowing what I know about how Nebraska likes to give tax increment financing away to developers, that like this would probably stand a good chance of being approved. But it's more, I think, on the USA Volleyball side, that if you have to get a board together and get consensus to, it's not a small thing to move your head of operations from the West Coast from Anaheim to Nebraska. I think there's still a perception of Nebraska on really anywhere that's not Nebraska, especially on both coasts. Like, why are you planting your flag there? So I think there's still some work that would have to be done on it. But I think, John's word, if he wants to be a real advocate for this and continue to lobby for it with some other coaches, could be really beneficial. Otherwise, it's just kind of another big dream that stays in that theoretical state. So I think at the earliest, we're a couple years away from knowing whether or not this is going to happen. I think you'd really have to have a commitment that the infrastructure, that the development around in the Gretna area that Nebraska Crossing wants to do was going to happen, regardless of whether or not USA Volleyball moved, because I don't know if you can make your plan around that. But, I think it doesn't surprise me that John is again at the forefront of like kind of trying to dream big about the sport. I keep joking that like what's left for this program to do, go play a match in space. And I'm glad we didn't bring it up, because maybe we would have spent 5 minutes theorizing on that.
We put another vessel on the moon again too, so it's possible. The United States is back on the moon, so let's start dreaming big.
There we go. It's 1/6 the gravity, so you're probably looking at a lot of service errors.
Yeah, but so I mean, there are a lot of questions, and I think a lot of uncertainty at this point too. But I think there's reasons to be excited too about the possibilities too. I mean, John is talking very publicly about that, and I think starting those conversations, I had people ask me about this last August and kind of, what are you hearing about this? I'm like, nothing yet. And kind of through some back channels said, oh, they're starting to have discussions. And then when the hearing came out and at the legislature is when the first thing, like, okay, this is, if they're talking about a committee hearing, there's a little bit of legs to it.
And I would encourage anyone, again, like we said when we were talking with John, the Nebraska Examiner has a good story up about what exactly would go into this bill, and I forget what the bill is, but it's it would pave the way for a huge development where Nebraska Crossing, the big outdoor outlets mall, is right next to Gretna. The other thing I think to keep in mind about, we're in the year 2024. The Summer Olympics happen this summer, and then a lot of times you might see some kind of leadership transition happen after an Olympic cycle. So USA Volleyball will be setting up what the 2028 cycle is, likely right after the Olympics. We don't know if Karch Karai is going to continue to be the coach of the U.S. women's national team. You heard John Cook mention Speraw. That's John Speraw, who's the U.S. men's coach and has been for a while. So you're probably going to have some kind of new cast of leaders and decision makers within USA Volleyball, and maybe they're working at the highest levels where those transitions aren't going to happen. But your new coaches are probably going to want to have some kind of input on where the developmental center is, where the training center is, and then maybe you have to win over some new people that you hadn't had to work with before. So a lot of moving parts still on this, and I imagine we're not going to know anything about this, and for at least another year or so.
Yeah, I think so. To go back to it is LB 1374 is the Good Life districts, but also the Gretna voters will be voting for bonds to help pay for some of the big improvements. So there's a lot of moving parts, but it's exciting. I think to think about the possibilities that Nebraska could be part of the forefront of volleyball once again too.
The other thing, one of the big things we talked about with John that I want to get your thoughts on. It's clear that he recognizes that however long he has left as the coach of Nebraska, but we're in like the final chapters of the John Cook coaching saga at Nebraska. And it does seem like he feels a responsibility or wants to be involved in discussions as to who comes after him. And I think, he looks up to Tom Osborne a lot. I know that they were close when Tom Osborne was the football coach here. He saw how Osborne was very active in picking a successor. It was Tom Osborne's decision that Frank Solich was going to be the head coach after him. And, he saw that Terry Pettit got to pick his successor. I don't know that it's safe. I don't think you could go as far as say John Cook is going to be the decider as to who the next volleyball coach at Nebraska is, but they're not going to just close the door on him and say like, hey, thanks, John, great career, we'll take it from here.
Yeah, because I think Trev is, I don't know if he's a humble enough of a leader to realize that he's not the expert, that John knows a lot of people in the volleyball community, has a vast coaching tree, and I mean, knows what it takes to be a successful coach, and have seen that up close as well, too. So I think it'll be a very collaborative effort when it does happen. I think that, I mean, I don't know how many years Trev just signed. He just signed a new contract extension. So I imagine it'll be sometime during his tenure, probably, unless things go drastically wrong in other parts of the academic athletic department. But I think that there will be a very collaborative decision and a lot of conversations going on where John will have that opportunity to share input, share thoughts, or here's my list of 10 people you can consider.
Right. And I mean, it is my theory, and we haven't spent really any time on the show talking about this. I think we should set aside like a full episode to do the whole who comes after John Cook episode, because it is the number one question that I get from people who are interested in Nebraska volleyball is, who do you think it's going to be? And everyone's got their names, and maybe even just like their top one or two names. And we can spend a whole show talking about that. And we didn't ask John today if, he had his preference. I do wonder if there is some sort of handshake, unspoken agreement, or not unspoken, but not written down and publicized agreement in place with somebody. I think there are candidates out there that, what I always tell people is, this is the Rolls Royce of volleyball programs. And you can see how quickly these programs can fall apart once a longtime leader leaves. I think Penn State might not have gotten their first choice to replace Russ Rose. We saw there was no transition. No transition is super easy. We saw Minnesota struggle last year, even though I think they got a really good coach in Keegan Cook to replace their Hugh McCutcheon, excuse me. And just these things aren't just run like a Swiss watch, right? Like John Cook has been the head of a volleyball program that's had almost unmatched success for 20 years. It is no guarantee that the next person comes in and just keeps the train running right on the tracks the same way that he did. And so I can see why he would want to have input into who comes next, because as you mentioned, Lincoln, like when Andy Banikowski left UCLA, they had a really good first year right after they won the national title, and then they have sort of wandered in the wilderness ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing. Nothing is guaranteed at that point, too. I mean, that's another. USC used to dominate a lot too. Hawaii, after Dave Soji left too, I mean, fell off the cliff. So I mean, they've rebounded, but they're no longer in the same elite tier of national title contenders like they were when they had their programs running under long-time, very successful coaches too. So it is a little bit of mystery, but I think that's. I mean, it sounds like John is taking it year to year, having these conversations, having these thoughts too. I mean, that is not going to up and decide in October, I'm done, going to Trev's office and let him know. So I think that those are ongoing conversations. And to those inside the high leadership, his decision to step away probably will not come as a surprise.
Yeah. And what we did get into a little bit too, it sounds like he is not going to explore the same model that brought him to Nebraska, where you try to have the next coach come in and be the top assistant or an associate head coach for a year. I think if they tried to do that just to pick a name with Danny Busboom Kelly, I think the sport is in a different place now, where that would be seen as almost like a bigger insult to a coach's current program than it probably was to Wisconsin when John Cook decided to leave the head coach of Wisconsin and come be the top assistant at Nebraska, knowing that he was going to take over for Terry Pettit the next year. And part of that has to do, Lincoln, with something that you spent some time writing about for Huskers Illustrated lately, which is just what the salary market is for coaches in volleyball across the country.
Volleyball Mag. The story actually was Volleyball
excuse
Mag.
me.
So,
I apologize, Lee. Lee Feinswan can yell at me for that. But, two great publications that Lincoln writes for.
Yes. Great. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of an overall look at where we are with salary too. I mean, volleyball coaches are still, they're all fairly well compensated. Even at the lower end, you may get $180,000, and which coincidentally, in doing my research, Jalen Reyes, the Nebraska's assistant coach, signed a new contract. I think he's already at that $180,000. He's getting paid more than I think the North Carolina head coach. So Nebraska's operating in a little bit different world than some other programs too. But yeah, so my big takeaway too, and kind of the point of the article, is that volleyball is making progress. I mean, John Cook made over $1 million a couple of years ago. Him and Jared Elliott were both kind of at that threshold based on their base salary and incentives this past season. But as far as much money as they're making, they still trail women's basketball. Women's basketball is far out in front and really making, Kim Mulkey down at LSU is making $3.6 million, I think. She's in the $3 million. But volleyball doesn't have anybody with a base salary over $1 million. And every single coach that I talked to for the story, both on the record and off the record, said volleyball is hard to push that upper echelon of the coaching salaries because they don't have anything comparable on the men's side. Men's volleyball does exist, but the resources are not as plentiful. There's only, I think, 30 programs by next year that will be offering that. So it's not a lot. Women's volleyball, a lot more popular, a lot more resources. But you look at men's and women's basketball coaches can all point to the salaries that men's basketball coaches are making and saying, how about some equality or equity going on between those two programs? But women's volleyball doesn't have that. And I think as a result, lags behind overall salary compensation packages.
Right. Well, and I think, the market, I think what would change the market for women's volleyball coaching salaries, what takes the median salary from where it is and raises it up 20-25%. And I think we've kind of started this already. We're going to have a few more in the next 5 years, as you're going to have some longtime coaches at prominent programs decide to retire. I think John Cook will probably be one of those. I think Mary Wise at Florida is probably going to be one of those. We're somewhere near the end of these coaches' tenures with their programs that they've been with for a long time. So are coaches, are those programs going to keep the salary of their successors at a similar level, or are they going to look at it as an opportunity to try to go backwards and try to save some money? Because if John Cook, and I forget what his exact salary is, but say he's making around $800,000, does Nebraska think, hey, we're going to need to offer that same salary to get the best coach possible when it comes time to replace John? Or are we going to be able to maybe save some money and offer his successor like $550,000 or $600,000? And I think that'll be interesting to see is how schools move this when they've got a chance to kind of reset the market.
Yeah, the one example that I had, I looked at that was at North Carolina too. They had their long-term coach. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he got, I think in 2022, the fiscal year 22, his total compensation was at $292,000. Then he retired. They brought in a new coach, and he was right at $150,000. So in North Carolina is not a premier volleyball program. So that is discouraging that a program would take a step back as far as pay rate as that for that. So that's the one example that I did look at too. Even when Keegan Cook at Washington, when he left to go to Minnesota, I think Leslie Gabriel, the new head coach, is making $187,000, whereas he is now making like $425,000 at Minnesota too, which again, Big Ten versus Pac-12 resources, that may be kind of different comparisons, but it exists. The resource gap exists in college volleyball and within conferences, and we'll see how that kind of. Yeah. But then it all goes back to television money too. You saw ESPN had their new championship contract with. For all the other championships that came out earlier this year, women's basketball drove that. It increased greatly, but women's basketball drove a lot of that. And I was kind of hoping that women's basketball would get separated out. So volleyball, softball, some of the other women's sports would lead that conversation, hopefully have a direct tie to the compensation packages in that TV deal.
And you think, what creates pressure on schools to increase salaries? And really, it's just coaching movement. When we had college football coaches kind of bouncing around from school to school, that's what reset the market, because you have to offer an attractive salary to lure a new coach to your program. And you're starting to see right now which schools are making commitments financially to their volleyball programs that are attractive enough to lure quality coaches away. We just had Northwestern go 2 months essentially without having a coach. And you can't tell me that that's not at least partially salary related. We heard that they were turned down by multiple candidates. They finally ended up with Tim Nolan from Grand Canyon, who doesn't even have to trade in his purple wardrobe to come up and be Northwestern's new coach. But, I think the more movement you see in coaches, probably precipitated by some long-time retirements, are going to, at least, if not at the schools that those successors are being hired at, it's going to have ripple effects across the industry. I think, salaries are going to go up. They're not going to go down.
Yeah, and you even see that, again, to relate to football and other sports too. If you're even talking to another program, a lot of the times that'll get you a raise at your current institution. But I think there has to be the threat that you want to leave. Another hot name within coaching circles is Kirsten Bernthal Booth up at Creighton too. She's been, people want to come after her, but I think she's very content living in Omaha and building the program and doing a very good job there too. But if she's not willing to move and kind of feels like she's a safe choice there, that's not going to raise the overall compensation packages.
Yeah. Quality of life is still, a pretty big factor for volleyball coaches. I think how much time, what are the demands of the job? What's the culture like? Do you like your athletic department? Do you coach a program where you're going to win 25 matches a year without, and there's not pressure to go to the Final Four and win 30 matches a year? I think those are all things that anyone in any job would do well to consider. Is what is your quality of life importance versus just your salary? And everyone's motivated by different things. Someone whose motivations, I guess we can only speculate about at this point too, is old friend of the show, Tyler Hildebrand, former Nebraska assistant who left Nebraska after his second stint as an assistant coach to go be Long Beach State's head coach. Spends 2 years at Long Beach State.
Head coach at Nebraska, not just assistant.
Associate head coach. Tyler was the top assistant, at Nebraska when in his second stint there. Well, he made waves in the college volleyball world recently by announcing he was leaving Long Beach State to go be an assistant coach at USC. You don't often see a head coach leaving a pro. This isn't like we're seeing in football a lot now, where a head coach at a mid-major is going to go be a coordinator in the SEC. I can only speculate as to why Tyler was making the move. Maybe we should try to get him and ask him. But do we think that this is a handshake deal to eventually become the head coach at USC? Or is this, it's not like they have a longtime coach who's nearing retirement, I don't believe. Or is this just like a quality of life thing where, hey, I tried being a head coach before. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. And the money maybe just isn't worth it to me. We have seen that happen with other people who were assistants and just decide, hey, I like being an assistant better. Former Nebraska assistant Eric Sullivan, who's been the top assistant at Texas forever, could go and be a head coach almost anywhere in the country if he wants to. And he has just decided, I like where I'm at as an assistant coach. And so what do we think could be happening there?
Yeah, it could just also come down. It's also puzzling because he's a Long Beach State graduate too. So it's not like he's just going to some random school. He's going back to his alma mater, school he has history with. So I don't know whether it was that he was there for 2 years, realized that there was internal things going on that just weren't up to par and weren't going to change, and decided to get out while he could and had a great offer. Didn't even probably have to change or move or anything, just changing addresses, commutes in LA, which also is not a pleasant thing to do. So I don't know if it just comes down to resources or advancement opportunities, or USC is getting pumped because they got some Big Ten TV money coming in they can then filter down to the volleyball program. So I feel there's a lot more going on that I haven't seen any interviews with Tyler or seen any reports that why he made this move, but it's good for him. And so again, speaking of people who a lot of people thought maybe were the heir apparents to Nebraska, because Nebraska has not had an associate head coach until John Cook, until Tyler came back the second time. And that really kind of put him at the forefront of those succession plans too. But now he's back to being an assistant, and he will visit Nebraska with another good friend, Allie Batenhorst, next fall when they visit Lincoln for the Big Ten season.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to talk a ton today about Nebraska's schedule that just came out. You can see what it is at Huskers.com. There's there's so many more teams. I keep forgetting. We've added 4 teams to the Big Ten, and so you're going to have only 3 home and homes every year now. So you're going to be playing a lot of one-offs, whether you're hosting or whether you're traveling. And there's only going to be 3 teams that Nebraska is playing home and home this year, and I believe Wisconsin is one of them. Is that right?
Iowa and Illinois as well. Yes.
Okay. One thing that it sounds like they're still putting the finishing touches on too that John mentioned is when their plans for that big tournament in Vegas in the spring fell through, it sounds like Lincoln, they're going back to the established model that they've had for just playing a one-off exhibition match somewhere in Nebraska. It sounds like they're close to announcing that. We just got to wait a little bit to find out who and where and when.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were at Central City last year. They've been to Grand Island recently. They've been out to a couple others.
McCook, I think. Scottsbluff for sure.
Ogallala, yeah. So, the Husker Roadshow will continue again this year. They will not have to get any flights to go to Vegas. So, hopefully we'll see. I do not keep up on the high school gym building news. So I don't know if any news.
Yeah. Who's got a new barn to show off?
Yeah. So we'll figure that out. Hopefully, I imagine, because as we're recording, we're probably 2 months, because Nebraska football is playing its spring game that last Saturday in April, and you think that volleyball doesn't want to go too late, so I imagine they'll probably be the weekend prior, and we're about 2 months away from that right now as we record this. So I bet you the news will come out sooner rather than later.
John also didn't have a whole lot to say about, he talked about the transfer portal, and I'm still not, we were running kind of along with him, and I wanted to say, are you sure, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and set whatever transfer rules you wanted, you wouldn't go back to the way it used to be with limiting player movement? He seemed to kind of think well, there's I don't want to speculate on it because there's nothing I can do about it anyway, and everyone has to play the game by the rules as they're currently written. He said no, he doesn't expect further roster movement, but nothing would surprise him. So I guess he's leaving the opportunity open to, having somebody come to him at the end of the spring and say, hey, I've got my degree now. I'm going to move along. I know we've talked on this show before. I personally wouldn't be surprised if there was one more departure and then they would have to go find somebody else to fill that roster spot with. Did you read anything between the lines there of whether or not the 2024 roster is kind of finalized as of right now?
No, I think that's kind of the line that he gives when people ask about the roster. I mean, he's always recruiting, always tinkering, always trying to find. I kind of feel like this is the group that Nebraska is going to get. I mean, the only questionable thing, if they lose someone, then yes, they will go have to fill some spots. But to me, I think this is fairly set. The only thing they don't have right now is a backup at opposite hitter, but Merritt Beast played all but 3 points maybe for Nebraska this past season at opposite. So you hope you don't need a backup, but I would be surprised. And there are 2 transfers, but Layla Blackwell from San Diego and Taylor Landfair from Minnesota won't join the team until May, early June, once their spring semesters are done and they have their diplomas in hand. So the team that's practicing right now isn't even the team that is going to be together completely for the fall season. So it's I think that the players that are remaining know their roles, know the possibilities, know kind of the paths ahead. But we'll see what happens during the spring season too, because I think that's a chance where a couple of the freshmen may come in, or the coaches may not like what they have and said, okay, we need to upgrade here and look out at what's in the portal. But I would be surprised to see what kind of talent level is available in the portal. It looks pretty picked over, and we'll see. But again, things change. I would be surprised.
You could have an All-American decide to go in the portal in May or June, and all of a sudden the dial spins again. The 2 incoming freshmen for this year are already on campus, right?
Yes, they are playing beach volleyball as well too. Yeah. Skylar Pierce and Olivia Mauk is on campus, and they're playing beach volleyball right now.
All right. Well, hey, that is our show today. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook for being our guest. It's our first show with Hurrdat Sports, so we want to thank Kahm Broham for being our producer today. We have never had a producer before, and man, I'm so grateful that we have one. You're seeing what we look like right now. Once again, we apologize for that. But hey, if you want Volleyball State merch, if you like this show, you want to wear it on your sleeve, we actually have that now. I now have my Christmas shopping done for friends and family for the coming year. You can find our Volleyball State stuff, shirts, hats, hurrdatsports.com/shop. Not only can you find merch from us there, but also some of the other great Hurrdat Sports shows. We love being part of the family. We hope that you check us out on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Hurrdat Sports, where you can find all the great Hurrdat Sports shows as well on YouTube. Plus, like we said at the top of the show, subscribe and review, give us 5 stars or, 4.5 if you're not feeling super charitable. That's going to be a way for us to keep spreading the word, getting us out there, growing this volleyball community, helping expand the show topics that we're talking about, and just kind of making a better, smarter, more informed volleyball fan, which is ultimately what we want to do with this little thing we got going on. Lincoln, what else should people do?
Yeah, if you want to interact with us, we have our Twitter account at VolleyballPod. Send in some emails at volleyballstate@gmail.com. Send in us questions, ideas, anything else, feedback, any personal ideas on where we could dress better. We'll take it. Interior decorating ideas, we'll also take that there. If you want to interact with me on Twitter, I am at Lincoln_VB.
And I am on Twitter at by Jeff Sheldon. Hey, we are who we are at this point. Lincoln and I, 2 guys in our 40s. You're not going to change us, but shouldn't stop you from trying. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Keep listening to us next time on Volleyball State.